Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. I am so excited to come to you today because today's episode is with Lisa Varga, who is the Library Journal 2024 Librarian of the Year. That's right, like for the United States. And you might be thinking, how did you get the Librarian of the Year to come on your podcast? Well, I'll tell you, I'm friends with her, and she texted me that she was listening to the podcast and was being really supportive and kind and, being encouraging to me. And I said, well, you got to come on now. So thank you, Lisa. We had a really beautiful conversation as well. Our book is Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day, Daily Meditations for the Ups, Downs, and In-Betweens by Kate Bowler. And a little bit more about Lisa. Besides being the Librarian of the Year, she is the Executive Director of the Virginia Library Association, immediate past chair of the Virginia Beach Public Library Board, and a member of the ALA Policy Corps focusing on Unite Against Book Bans. Lisa is a hero of mine, and you'll hear some of the advocacy work that she's done. And I'm also so grateful to call her my friend. So I hope you enjoy. And also, we recorded at the Marriott Oceanfront in Virginia Beach, which is beautiful. And I do want to thank them for allowing us to record in their oceanfront suite. Enjoyed some drinks, some ruby red crushes, talked about life. So enjoy. Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay. First of all, let's acknowledge, thank you. You got us this amazing suite at the Oceanfront Marriott. So, what kind of strings did you have to pull to get us this location?
So it's kind of interesting because my connection to doing conferences all around this area and the participation in the Virginia Society of Association Executives, I've got people in my phone that I can just text and say, hey, can you get me a space? I certainly did not expect the scope of this location.
Yeah. We're like on the ocean. We are looking out onto the Atlantic Ocean. It's beautiful.
Yes.
We are, what is this?
This is the executive hospitality suite. Mm-hmm. So it's often used if you are having, say, a wedding. This is where the wedding party would hang out before the wedding.
Yes.
Or if you're having a corporate event and want to host a small group of people for an intimate meal, there's a bar, and it's really, the seating is glorious.
Yes, I think we're going to definitely give a shout out to this executive suite at the oceanfront for letting us record here.
Thank you, Justin and Jocelyn, for making it possible.
We appreciate y'all so much. And I've been here vacationing. This is your hometown, Virginia. Well, not hometown. How would you term Virginia Beach for you?
It's my home.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I think my hometown is where I grew up in New Jersey, but my home is Virginia Beach. It has been since 2010.
Okay. And I wanted to point, so we're drinking your favorite drink. This is my first time having this. Tell us what this is.
This is my beach favorite. It is called a Grapefruit Crush.
Mm-hmm.
The Orange Crush is very popular here in Virginia Beach, and most restaurants have some sort of modification or different variation of it. This is ruby red grapefruit juice, tonic, and vodka, with a dehydrated orange slice. Oh, no, that is a grapefruit slice on top.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it look fancy.
It is, and it's very refreshing. It's a light beverage for the beach.
Perfect for a beach time.
Mm-hmm.
I love grapefruit.
Me too.
It's very citrusy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. And then I guess I'm really... Okay, and I probably should have brought this up with you before we start recording, but you'll see how it goes.
Okay.
you are clearly a library leader. This is a library podcast. You were the Virginia, or not the Virginia, you were the Librarian of the Year this year.
Through Library Journal, yes.
Through Library Journal. So anyway, we can talk about that. I didn't know how much of that we can bring up, or if you want to, let's jump right into the book, and then we can talk about that later. It's however you want to do it.
No, we can talk about the Librarian of the Year thing. It came as quite a shock to me. I didn't know that I had been nominated for it by my colleagues.
Really?
I didn't even think I was qualified for it. I don't think I'd ever had it on my radar.
Uh-huh.
And so it was quite a surprise when I got the phone call in December and then had to keep it a secret
Yeah.
for a month.
When it came out in January.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I had to have a whole photo shoot.
Yeah.
Got my makeup and hair done, and a local friend of mine who does editorial work for magazines found me the photographer, who's turned out to be just a wonderful friend
Yeah.
as well. And yeah, we got to use the joint use library of Virginia Beach Public Library here for the photo shoot. Joint use is a combination library between Tidewater Community College and Virginia Beach Public,
Okay.
and it's a beautiful facility.
Okay. Well, I was so proud of you for getting that, and you've done so much library advocacy over the last couple of years, and I didn't know if you wanted to speak on that or give advice to our friends in the field.
I think the thing that I have noticed most of all, I joke that I've become an intellectual freedom therapist. My phone number has been given out across the country to people who call me and want to talk about what's been happening in their communities. And I think the important thing is these are people who care very passionately about the lived experiences of others. And the thing we have to remember is that the arguments being used against books are also arguments against the existence of certain people.
Yeah.
And that's something worth fighting against. And although it's exhausting and although it is hard, it is well worth it. Mm-hmm. We are on the correct side of history.
Yeah.
So take a breath if you're going through this right now. Recognize that part of this is structured to make you feel isolated and alone. Part of it is meant to make you be quiet. And I've kind of been doing the opposite.
And you took, what was it? You took a bill to was it the Virginia Beach School Board?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I witnessed a pattern of people opposing books showing up at the school board and during their public comment time starting their speeches with "my name is" and "I pay taxes," and then they would go on a tirade against books. And I thought, well, I am also a taxpayer, and I support our librarians making the decisions they've been educated and trained to make. And so I did a rough calculation, because again, librarian, not mathematician. I estimated about how many hours these reconsiderations were taking, because, and I'll be clear here, and I think I was during that time, reconsiderations are a natural part of the collection development process. Mm-hmm. We welcome the discussion with our community members.
Yes.
But the way these are coming in are rampant, and they are typically arguments that have been copied and pasted from websites. These are not books that people have actually read. They just oppose the content because they've seen a page or two. They haven't read the work in its entirety. And so I started to think about, okay, I've seen these people mention their taxes, and I'm spending most of my nights listening to crying librarians. And that's a lot of time. Yeah. And I needed to express that library services are not free, even within the schools. They come with a cost, and the cost is an experienced individual. Also, this was impacting not just the library, but the school board administration, the attorney for the schools, the Freedom of Information Act officer, the marketing people, the media inquiries. All of this was part of this campaign, and that's not a great use of tax dollars. And so I showed up with an invoice. The person who I was presenting it to was not there. The attendance record was another issue. And in the intervening 2 weeks between meetings, that person posted on Facebook pages that they'd found 100 more books they were going to be filing reconsiderations for. And so I went back with a larger invoice and said, it was for $7 million. And I said, I'm going to give this to City Council. I'm going to ask them to put $7 million in the school budget to cover the cost of this project you are creating. And that way, when our tax dollars go up next year, everyone will know you're the reason.
Yeah.
And so I think it was just a different tactic than what we had seen up until that point. And we've seen a lot of creative, powerful people speak up in public comment meetings.
Yeah.
I think I mention public comment so often, my TikTok just keeps feeding me snippets of people speaking up at public meetings.
Yeah. Got you fired up.
Yes, absolutely. That and legislative hearings.
Yeah.
I'm quite delightful at cocktail parties.
You are.
Way before this happened, but now I have so many more things to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and on behalf of everybody here in Virginia and obviously the country, thank you for using your creative voice and also your voice period just to speak up. And
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
so it was awesome. It was impressive. I was proud of you. I was thankful for you. All of the above.
Thank you. And I think what was interesting about it, and I have talked about this before, so I don't mean to be repetitive, but when I put it on the clip of me presenting the invoices on Facebook, I got a lot of positive response because so many of people in my Facebook bubble are library people.
Right.
My LinkedIn is a little broader, like I mentioned, my association with the Virginia Society of Association Executives and other people I've met throughout my life through their business connections. That's where it really got traction. Other people who didn't know this was happening or didn't understand the argument and or time that went into it.
Right.
That was what really resonated with people, and I got a lot of folks reaching out to me about it that way.
That's awesome. And to expand, like you said, expand it outside of libraries.
Yes.
Because so many people don't realize it's happening or that it's that big of a deal.
Correct.
Well, we can get into that more. I thank you for being willing to talk on that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I want to talk about this book that you've picked today.
Okay.
We're getting into it.
I'm glad it made you laugh.
It didn't make, well, it made me cry also reading it. And I, like, just between you and me, like, just to preface, I am a person that cries very easily.
Okay.
So if for whatever reason,
If you tear up.
if I tear up, is just, I was telling my husband, I feel like maybe my parents, when they were pregnant with me, like met like a trickster in the woods. It's like, your daughter will be moderately tall. She will also cry easily. It's the trade-off.
She'll get height and emotional.
It's like two very odd characteristics. So anyway, all right.
Yeah.
So what is our book today?
Our book today is Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day by Kate Bowler, author of Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. This is a daily meditations for the ups, downs, and in-betweens.
Yeah.
And I had a feeling you would like this because Kate is a North Carolinian.
Yes. She's a professor at Duke.
Correct.
The Harvard of the South. It's something we can be proud of from my home state. So this book came out this year, right?
It was on sale in January, yes. And I got access to it early. I'm sitting here holding an advanced reader copy, an ARC. I will say my acronyms.
Yeah.
Because we request ARCs for the VLA conference in the fall. And this was in one of the boxes that arrived.
Okay.
And I don't typically take books for myself, but I am a huge fan of Kate.
Okay.
And I had been hearing about this and was very excited to get my hands on it.
Had you read her other books already?
I hadn't actually read a book of hers in its entirety, but I had listened to her podcast, and I've read lots of articles and listened to interviews with her. And her gentle voice when talking about really hard things just spoke to me.
Yeah. And so what about that in particular speaks to you? Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I guess we're going to go down the trauma and tragedy trail here. I first became aware of Kate when my husband died suddenly in 2018. And a lot of people were sending me books. You sent me a book. I do remember Anne Lamott.
Yeah.
Which was lovely. And part of what happened to me after his death was that I couldn't sit down and read a book anymore. I couldn't just sit and read. And I started listening to audiobooks because my brain just wouldn't let me sit and cozy up with a book. So when I heard that Kate was doing one that was a daily meditation, I thought, oh, finally something that I can really dig into because it's just snippets at a time. I don't have to remember characters. I don't have to follow plot lines. I just want to read a page or two at a time and be done with it. And so knowing what I'd heard from her over the years, it made a lot of sense to me that she would put out something that catered to that side of the brain,
Yeah.
that it would allow you to just explore for a few moments and then go on instead of digging in.
I forget, it's 100 daily meditations, I think.
89.
89. Very close. So I think like there's some that are for good days, some are for bad days.
Right. And I think, I grew up Jewish, so I did not have this daily meditations in my life. And while Kate does have a Christian background, obviously she's a professor of divinity, I find her very accessible, and I don't find it to be lofty.
Yeah.
It's very practical applications. And so she has pages here for when you have a terrible day, for when you need to quiet your anxious mind, when someone has done you harm, how to not drown in other people's problems.
Yeah.
All of these things that really speak to the human experience.
Yeah.
I think that she's managed to take all of these feelings that our brains have over the course of a day and put words to them and give you a few moments to just sit and think about how you're responding to those things happening in your life. And she does have, passages from the Bible. She's got some reflection prompts. But, even it's something like when you don't feel fulfilled anymore, how to explore that feeling. And she'll have a couple of paragraphs and then a blessing for that. And it's bite-sized,
Yeah.
I think is the best way for me to put it. And it feels very welcoming.
Yeah.
And it feeds into the part of my brain that allowed me to not have to sit down with a whole book. Because honestly, when you asked me to be on the podcast, I thought, it has to be an audiobook because I can't get through anything else. And I've gone off the rails with my audio because I don't necessarily hunt down a book. I look for narrators that I love that have really caught on to me. So Marin Ireland and Julia Whalen, anything they read, I will listen.
I love Julia Whalen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I read that one.
Yeah.
I think that was the one she's written.
Yes. And I just finished up on Memorial Day weekend, which was very timely, The Women by Kristen Hanna. And so just sidetrack into some of the things that I deal with at VLA. We recently became partners with Amazon Business, and we get our libraries discounts to use Amazon pricing. But I was on the phone with our representative talking about books, and I talked about the popularity of Kristen Hanna's The Women. And we were able to see how many copies it sells on Amazon and that sort of thing. And I introduced her to the idea of looking through a library catalog and seeing how many people have holds on it.
Oh, okay.
And she was stunned to find that some of these libraries have 600 holds and 100 copies. And so it really led into an interesting discussion about accessibility.
Right.
And I told her the secret sauce when you're looking for a book that popular is always large print. That's always got a lower hold list.
Yes.
I'm letting the cat out of the bag.
Yeah. Well, that's that trick. I don't know how reciprocal borrowing agreements are in other areas. Living in the Richmond metro area, all of the counties around there all have reciprocal.
Okay.
So I have a Richmond card. I have an Henrico card. I have a Chesterfield card.
Yep.
I have cards that they probably should take away from me, but they haven't yet. I'm not even going to say the names.
Amazing.
And so you have all those, your Libby lined up, and then I'll see who's the shortest hold. So
Absolutely. It's very strategic
It
when
is.
you want to get your hands on a book
Yeah.
or your ears to listen.
Yeah, but that's large type is the other trick too. So.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, good job informing others about,
Thank you.
library accessibility.
Yeah, and the demand when these books come out and start getting traction.
Absolutely.
I think it's important, I think independent booksellers already know it and they see the pattern, but when you're talking about a behemoth like Amazon, giving them a peek into what it's like for a library to try to meet that demand, especially at the end of a quarter or
Right.
the end of a fiscal year.
Yeah.
There just isn't the money right now to buy, I think, the number of copies, and I'm speaking in generalizations, the numbers of copies that you would need to fulfill all of these requests in a short time period.
Yeah.
And so if Amazon could make it more accessible for people, that would be great.
It would be great. And also for people in general to be aware of that there are 600 hold queues.
Yeah.
There's 600 people waiting on a book at any given library for these bigger books, because sometimes a lot of people in my life have enough money that they don't have to rely on a library.
Right.
But there's a ton of people in all our communities that they can't afford to go and buy every single popular book that's out. So they rely on the library system to buy them for them, and then they can share, basically.
Absolutely, and that's the sustainability that libraries offer too. I mean, just the idea of that many copies of a book being sold, that we're able to reuse books over and over again, is really powerful, I think, for people who are interested in sustainability.
Yeah. Very wonderful. I'm glad we're
off on a tangent.
Chris and Hannah. You need to subscribe. We're obviously supporting you as well as Kate Bowler. So she has a podcast called Everything Happens.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit? Because I've only listened to a few episodes, so I'm assuming you're more knowledgeable than I am.
Sure. I think that getting back to the idea of someone's voice being very appealing, that's what leads me to Julia Whalen and to Marin Ireland.
Yeah.
I think also Kate's voice is very calming.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those, sometimes I fall asleep listening to her. I'm looking at she has interviewed Anne Lamott, which is another favorite of ours.
Yes.
She's interviewed Rainn Wilson, Samantha Bee, Alan Alda. The list just goes on, and there are some people I've never heard of before, right? But hearing their stories is very powerful, because she's always talking about the things that happen in life, typically that you can't control, and what your response to them is. And so she's got Stephanie Whittles walks an episode called When Life Gives You Lemons, and this is Harris Whittles' sister, who was he was a writer who took his life years ago. And it's not always just a sad story, but I think she really takes the bad things that happen in life and gives a space for people to talk about them, because we do live in a land of toxic positivity. Of, if you'll just be happy, then everything will be happy. Or if you, if you take time for self-care, then everything else will be all right. And I definitely think that prior to my husband's death, I did have a pretty sunny outlook on life. And after that, things changed for me. And I realized that no matter what I tried to control, I had no control. And so I tried to just hold dear to me the things that were precious. And one of the things is my commitment to intellectual freedom. And so when this all started happening, I had the time to put into the fight. Not a lot of people do, but I was at a point where my kids were all kind of grown. I think my last one might have still been in high school at the time, and they were often doing their own things. Yeah. And so I could devote the energy and the knowledge I'd gained over the years to it.
Yeah.
And Kate made it okay for me to do that, to sit in the suck and take it on.
Yeah. What did that feel like?
Gosh, how did it feel? It's such a jumble of emotions. I mean, I want to do something that would make him proud, of course. He was my best friend, and he was there for me when I decided to go to graduate school. The day I got in, he drove to Rutgers and got me a sweatshirt that I still have and a shot glass that I still have. And celebrated with me and was so enthusiastic about my career, loved watching me plan a conference from nothing to everything. And so when I saw people under attack that I cared about, I knew that I had a unique voice in that. As I said, I had the time, and also because I'm not employed by a library or a school, I serve at the pleasure of the board, the elected board of the Virginia Library Association. I could get away with a lot more than a lot of other people could. Yeah. And I was not going to take that responsibility lightly. I was going to jump in and say the things and do the things and point out the hypocrisy and show people that librarian time and education is valuable. And so when I was interviewed for the Library Journal article, I had just read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin.
I love.
I'm going to make you cry again. And Lisa Pete, the author of the article, asked me, what is it that keeps you motivated and keeps you going in this fight? And one of the characters in that book, spoiler alert, someone dies, says to another, we put our pain into the work and the work gets better. That line didn't make it into the article, as it shouldn't have. It didn't really fit that narrative. But I want to say it now because it's important. I put the pain into the work. I think a lot of people imagine, he's been gone 5 years, that there might be some sort of moving on, or whatever, and that isn't it. It's just that I've redirected the energy into trying to make life better for people, many of whom I'll never meet, and that's fine.
Yeah. You said that so beautifully, and I am a little teary holding it together.
I have that effect.
Yeah. And her, I was thinking today about, like, her podcast, for example. It's called Everything Happens,
Yes.
and I haven't listened to a whole bunch of it. I'm guessing it's the whole Everything Happens for a reason. She's taken that out.
Yes, because one of her first books was Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved.
Right.
So someone sent me a link to that book, probably in the first couple of months after he died, and I just loved the title, but I knew I couldn't actually sit down and read the book. Mm-hmm. So it's been in my shopping cart for 5 years now, and I haven't gotten it. But I've listened to so much, and I was actually supposed to hear her. She was speaking at the Sixth and I Synagogue in D.C. a couple months ago, and I had a conflict, so I had to give up my tickets. Mm-hmm. But I listened to the audio of that discussion, and I really wished I'd been in the room. I'm going to hear her in person one day, no doubt.
Okay.
It'll be a priority. I know you and I have to take a road trip to hear Anne Lamott at some point, so I'm going to add Kate to the list.
Yes. Well, and I don't know if I told you, so I had sent you a list before this of all the ones, and I had on there Anne Lamott, and you were like, oh no, someone here took her.
Right.
I took her.
Of course you did.
It hasn't come out yet, but I did Bird by Bird.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah, which is the kind of the classic seminal one, but also crying in that. This is my life.
Yeah. I was, we are introduced to books in so many different ways. I was introduced to Anne Lamott by my sister-in-law, Leanna, who got me a copy of Operating Instructions, a journal of my son's first year, and she gave it to me when I had my first son, Bradley, and I would read it when I was nursing him. So talk about a crying, just emotional time. She spoke to me.
Yeah. I love her passion for reading. I love her passion for writing.
Yeah.
All of that too. But then I struggle, and I got a little bit in this as well. I struggle with perfectionism. Yeah. Perfectionism is believing that if you do everything just right, and this is where I'll start crying. If you do everything just right, you just hit them all, nothing bad will ever happen to you. And believe it or not, it doesn't work. It does work to a point. It works to a point that, you kind of box yourself in, and you make a framework for your life. But then shitty things still happen.
Yeah, I played the game. I did everything I was supposed to. Mm-hmm. I mean, as much as I could, balanced work and motherhood and a house and friendships and family, and still something bad happened. Yeah. And I hate most of all that something bad happened to my children. They did nothing to deserve what they lost. And that's been hard too.
I'm so sorry that happened to you and to them, and
thank you.
It sucks.
Yeah, and for his sisters and his mom and, all his cousins. He had such an extensive family, all from North Carolina originally.
Whoop, whoop. Raise up.
Exactly. So it's the everyday of us being without him is hard. Some days are harder than others. Mm-hmm. Some days I slide back down the mountain. Mm-hmm. But what it's also given me is the ability to connect with other people who have experienced tragedy in the same way. And so the sad part about my club is that there will be more of us. And so the time I take to talk to people about intellectual freedom and that therapy, I also reach out to folks who have lost their spouse and connect with them, because I remember how helpful it was when people reached out to me.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to do, I think, sometimes, to know, reaching out to somebody who's gone through trauma and grief and...
Right. No, I was just thinking that there was someone who did say to me about a week after he died, everything happens for a reason. And I was so irrationally angry at that. And that's why I think that books like Kate's really help to calm that.
Yeah.
Because people don't know what to say. They
Right.
absolutely don't.
Right.
And you also don't know what you're ready to hear at certain points when you're in the middle of all of this, life crumbling around you.
Yeah.
And so just giving people grace is important too.
Yeah. We should all give each other grace. It's hard probably as a fresh widow to give people grace who are telling you, like, yeah, oh, well, you're going to grow from this, and this is all going to be okay. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not over, but it's never going to be the same again.
Right. Or you're young, you'll get married again. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't have a response to that. I still don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was listening to, so I listened to the episode that she did with Rob Delaney.
Oh, yes.
Have you seen Catastrophe?
Obsessed.
Oh, if you're listening to this, you haven't seen Catastrophe. It's so good. I think it's on Prime. Sharon Horgan. Yeah, and she's an Irish actress. The best joke on there is the daughter, Moran. Nobody knows how to pronounce
the
Irish.
child's name.
But his son died.
Yes.
Just before his 3rd birthday. And I was very moved by it, but then was also just very honest about, like, what that experience is like. And this is a skill, I don't know, they call it like a superpower thing that they never would have wanted, of understanding all this.
Have you listened to his book or read his book about his son's death?
I haven't read it yet.
So I listened to that one on audio when I was on a train in Italy a couple of years ago, which makes me sound very fancy. But I actually have a note in my phone because this quote of his made so much sense to me. He said, "Grief drove a bus through the part of my brain where memories are stored." And it resonated so hard because there were these things, when you're in a marriage or relationship and you have these stories together and one of you always remembers it one way or one of you tells it better. I sometimes have these thoughts of, remember that time we went to, and I can't bounce it off him to make sure I'm remembering it correctly. So you definitely go through a period, I think, and probably many people do regardless, of just, am I remembering that right? And I think that's one of the things that is so constant, or I think I'm probably choosing the wrong word, but what it is about the First Amendment is that it's right. The First Amendment and what we're fighting for is right. I don't have to worry about it being a memory because it's fact. Yeah. And I can rely on it because it means the same thing when we look at the interpretations of the cases. And it becomes rote and part of my brain as opposed to me trying to remember an event or something. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, it's funny that you would mention Rob and I would have a quote in a note on my phone.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love, sometimes things get tied together, you just don't know. But
absolutely. There's a thread.
Right? Yeah. And I found, I love what she has to say. And I don't know if we talked about her story of Kate.
We haven't talked about it.
Okay. Go ahead. Haven't talked about Kate's story of, she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer at 35 as a relatively new mother.
Yes.
I don't know. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I think the experience that she had suddenly fearing for her own life, fearing for her children's life, and the way that she explored that and journaled about it and kept... we're going to just give you a moment. I don't know if you'll all be able to hear this, but the jets are flying. That is the sound of freedom here in Virginia Beach.
USA. USA.
And so I think that she has taken that experience and made so many things relatable for people who didn't have an outlet for it before, couldn't find people with similar experiences. I don't know if I'm explaining it the way that you were hoping to talk about her.
Yeah.
Her
Well, I
illness.
mean, I think it was sort of similar to like listening to Anne Lamott, where she took something that people kind of shy away from. People, Anne Lamott says things that I would probably take to my grave, and all of a sudden I'm just like, oh, I'm not the only one. And I kind of feel like she's done this with grief and trauma specifically.
Yeah, that's a really good way to parallel it. I mean, she says, I'm going to read this, for that unsettled feeling, and this is for the Saturday of Lent, week 1. Perhaps you're not stirring up any trouble. Trouble comes to you. You may be feeling unsettled because you are experiencing the cost of what is already good in your life. You are loving and trying and helping, and all of it hurts. And I just really, passages like that speak to me, because no matter how hard we try, like you were saying, if I do all the things, everything will be good. But even when you do all the things, you have this pit in your stomach or in your heart of what's next? When's the shoe going to drop?
Right.
You know, and being able to put words to those feelings. I think that she explains a lot of the anxiety that I had prior to this death in my life, where I started doing a little more exploring and, you know, deeper therapy and that sort of thing. I can look back on moments prior and think, oh yeah, I probably should have talked to someone about that.
Yeah.
You know, I probably should have explored that a little bit more.
But when you're going and going and going, you keep thinking like everything's going to be fine if I just keep doing, but you don't dig deeper. I mean, I can 100% relate to that.
Yeah, and how much are we expected to do when we're trying to do all of the other things?
Yeah.
You know? Sorry, I'm already caught up in reading. Instead of berating ourselves for not being worry-free, let's imagine for a moment that peace is like a homecoming. We are at the end of a story, and it's time to return home to rest. We are like Peter Rabbit coming back to his cozy burrow when he's done a day of racing around Mr. McGregor's garden. When we cannot solve the problem of our worried minds, let's bless our desire to return home to ourselves. We are very tired rabbits indeed. And sometimes you just need someone to say that to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And to remind you, well, the rabbit race of life, like we all think there's a destination that you're going to get somewhere.
Right.
And really it's every day it's kind of getting through
Yeah.
the shittiness of it all.
This is so uplifting. I'm sure people are going to stop listening to it. And I think the thing is that it doesn't mean everything's over, right? You still have to do things. You still have to get shit done.
Yeah.
But you're allowed to give yourself the time to stop and go, what if I don't do that one thing? What if I don't pair the socks? And just FYI, I have 3 boys that were born in 3 years, like every year for 3 years, so very close together. I stopped pairing socks when the youngest was like 4, because they all seemed to be the same size.
Yeah.
So I always had a giant bin of just mismatched socks. And I want to say it was one day after Alex died that I just looked at that bin and I thought, I'm just throwing them all out. And I just dumped them in the trash, and we started with new socks.
Okay.
I went through to make sure there were no stance socks or anything that was, important.
Okay.
But
yeah, and I think even the title of this book, like have a terrible, beautiful day.
right. It ties in a lot to Nora McInerney, if you've listened to her. So Nora was a young widow who created the Hot Young Widows Club. And she had a podcast called Terrible, Thanks for Asking. And I think that when you're going through something hard and people ask, how are you? It is a really hard question to answer, because there's so many different things that are going on and you don't know what to say first. And so Terrible, Thanks for Asking is a good summary of that. And so I find parallels in Nora's observation as well as Kate's. And I think their acknowledgement that some things are terrible is a really good antidote to the toxic positivity of just keep your chin up.
Yeah.
Things will turn around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually, talking about books, the week before Alex died, I checked out a book that had been on hold at the library for me, a Nora McInerney book. It was on my nightstand, and I posted that day, here's another book I'll probably never finish on Facebook, right? And then a week later, Alex dies, and I still have this book on my nightstand. And that was where I learned about the Hot Young Widows Club, which was a group on Facebook for people who had lost folks when they were young. And when they tried to go to grief groups, it tended to be a lot of older folks in the widow or widower community. And so Nora and one of her friends, whose name escapes me right now, created this vetted Facebook group where you had to submit information that they would approve and then let you into this group. And so I was immediately, within a couple of weeks, in the Hot Young Widows Club on Facebook. And I met so many wonderful people also going through what I was going through. And we get together in real life now.
That's great.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, actually, one of them, Kelly Clark, is a librarian, so I got to meet Kelly at the last conference we were at. It wasn't PLA, it might have been last summer's ALA conference. And a group of us got together in pre-pandemic in Salt Lake City. There were like 12 or 14 of us that all went to this one woman's house. She had a property that she was going to be selling, and she said, let's have one last hurrah. And all these people from all over the country flew in, and we just went to dinner and went hiking and just spent time together.
Yeah. And being around other people that understand what you're going through.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And can share the stories, like you're saying, of the Anne Lamott ones of like taking to your grave. There are things that happen, not many people are their best when grief hits.
Yeah.
And family members, there are often bad feelings and all kinds of other stuff that happens. And to have this space to just talk was wonderful.
Right.
And connect. And we all lost our people in some way.
Yeah.
And it was all horrible, and there's no grief Olympics for who did it better or who, not who died better, that's terrible, but like who handled it better. It's just that we've all connected on different levels.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, not awesome, but
it's awesome that we found each other.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think the thing that speaks so clearly to me about what that group is that it's community, and that's what libraries are about.
Yeah.
Right? So it completely makes sense that I would get on a plane and go meet 14 strangers in Utah for a weekend. My kids were like, you're going where?
Yeah.
But it was wonderful and refreshing, and, we were just a bunch of adults feeling a little broken inside and finding each other to talk to. It was great. So if any of my Hot Young Widows are listening, shout out to y'all.
I hope they are.
I will definitely post about this in the group.
Good. Is there anything we haven't touched on? The normal questions I ask, I feel like we've sort of naturally rolled through.
I just am a big fan of a book that doesn't need you to read it front to back.
Yeah.
I think that, especially when I was younger, the idea was that you always finish a book.
Okay.
And when I started working at the public library, I noticed there was a parent there who just said, if you read 3 chapters and you don't like it, don't spend your time on it. We'll find another one. And I thought, maybe I should have been following that all along.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of like TikToks about people that have DNFs, did not finish piles. Right. I just feel like maybe I appreciate not having that pressure by having something like this to go to.
Okay.
And so it's just been on my nightstand since I picked it up last October. I don't know if I've read the whole thing. I've certainly read parts of it again and again.
Yeah.
I've underlined some things in it.
So it's a daily meditation. I know it starts off usually with like a Bible verse. It's a lot of from the Psalms, and then it will have basic paragraph about what the segment is covering, and then almost like a poem written. It's really beautiful, and she'll have like a writing prompt or a thinking prompt. So it's good for if you wanted to go through it and do like just a daily meditation.
Yeah, it's good to take a moment out of the chaos to think about how you're feeling.
Absolutely.
To be able to identify those emotions and have someone maybe try to pull them out of you with these prompts.
Mm-hmm. And she has like a lot of like meditation prompts. So if that's something someone's into, and I guess I'm talking if someone is into that, who would you recommend this book to? I mean, if it's, you already said it's maybe somebody who doesn't want to read a whole book.
Yes. I would think anyone who's doing probably their own deconstruction work. Mm-hmm. You don't have to have suffered a tragedy to pick up something like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that anyone who wants to think about the way they're responding, the patterns in their life that maybe have not been serving them well, or they're just questioning, what have I been doing?
Yeah.
It's a good thing to ponder.
Think about, dig deep a little bit. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I feel like this is definitely my fanciest podcast yet.
I'm proud to bring you to the Marriott.
Yes. So, cheers.
Cheers to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the therapy.
Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.